And we have plenty of international reaction coming up to the events over the night. First of all, though, let's take a look at exactly what happened and take a listen to this. These are the sirens over Jerusalem and the explosions in the sky there over Israel. Some 300 drones and missiles fired towards Israel. And the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, saying that 99% of them were taken out of the sky, not just above Israel. These pictures next are from Jordan. Allies helping here, the US, the UK, France, among those countries, shooting down objects over airspace outside Israel. Also Syria and Damascus, two similar scenes there. We have a look now at the Iron Dome heading back to Israel, which is the defence mechanism covering much of Israel. Interceptor missiles effectively fired from the ground there, leaving the trails in the sky up towards those drones and missiles. The assessment of the damage from Israel are very limited. No deaths, they say. Some infrastructure at a military base hit and a young girl injured and being treated. We had these pictures coming out of Iran, some government supporters celebrating there. We don't have any wider context for those pictures there. Iran saying this is a retaliation strike for what's widely believed to be an attack by Israel on the consulate in Damascus 2 weeks ago. And let's just show you a map of the region here so you get an idea of the scale of what's happened and potentially what's at stake. You can see Iran there and Israel and the distance between them. This is the very first time a direct attack on Israel from Iranian soil. Well, with me now, Jeremy Bowen, our international editor. As you can see, I'm our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. We're going to pick through exactly what this means. Jeremy, good to see you. So just tell us where we are, where the region stands right now.
Well, I think the region's looking at the Israeli war cabinet and seeing what it's going to decide to do next. The message coming from Israel's Western allies, particularly the US, also the British. Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, has just said that Britain was also involved in shooting down drones, and he said this is now a time for cool heads. In other words, message to Israel, you've got a victory here, bank it, hang on to it, do not escalate any further, because the risks of escalating, maybe a strike back onto Iranian territory, are very great. Israel has sustained a serious attack, but with a great deal of help from its allies, it has been able to withstand it. It was not a full-on assault in the way that perhaps it would have been had Hezbollah in Lebanon joined in with their massive arsenal of missiles that over the years the Iranians have helped them build up.
And Frank Gardner, if we can start with a similar question to you as well, your broad thoughts on where exactly the region stands now.
Okay, if you imagine a ladder, all right, with a lot of different rungs, we are halfway up that ladder of escalation. Israel could choose to go up it or down it, because right now we've seen a number of escalations, a number of red lines crossed, as Jeremy puts it. And this is certainly a red line, and it's the first time Iran and Israel have fired at each other, in this case, Iran shooting directly at Israel. And despite the fact that there is restraint being urged on all sides, Israel's war cabinet is it's vowed what it calls a significant response. Now, it can do that in a number of ways. It could bide its time, strategic patience. It could hit back at its proxies, Iran's proxies like Hezbollah, as it has done, and others around the region. It could target the exact missile bases from which these drones and missiles were launched in Iran. That would be an escalation. Or it could go even further and do an all-out attack on Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps bases throughout Iran. That would be a major escalation, and one that would prompt, I think, a massive Iranian response. And that's not what anybody in the region wants. Everyone's calling for things to calm down now, but I'm not sure that Israel is going to let this one go, as it were.
OK. Jeremy, can I just get your thoughts on the Iranian foreign minister coming out and speaking, basically the lines from Iran effectively saying that this current action is finished. They described it as a defensive action. but if there are any more attacks, then they will respond. What do you think of the messaging there?
Well, let's just rewind back to the 1st of April. That's when the attack took place on the Iranian diplomatic compound in Damascus, killing senior officers, senior generals, but I think more importantly for the Iranians, hitting ground they consider to be, and legally it is, Iranian soil. The Israelis have made an unconvincing argument that the presence of those officers in the building rendered it not a diplomatic premise, but a military position that it was okay to hit. That is not a convincing argument. So Iran made it very clear that they would respond. Question, how were they going to do it? The suggestion was that perhaps they might try and do something a little bit oblique, something indirect, but they've opted for this full-on attack. Now, the attack did not do a great deal of damage. Was that because they assumed, having signaled so clearly that they were going to do it, that so Israel, the Americans, the Brits and others could get ready? Or was that simply because they're simply not up to hurting Israel with its formidable air defenses along with its allies? So I think where we're at now is a time of great uncertainty. Really, the rules of the game in the Middle East have changed a lot since the Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. And now that Iran has, well, first the Israeli strike, Iran's response, what will Israel do next? We are very much in unknown territory here. But certainly I think it's absolutely clear that if a way is not found to stop this steady escalation into a wider war, all-out war in the Middle East, then it's going to keep on going in that direction, which would be absolutely catastrophic for all concerned.
Okay, Joe, we're going to come back to the kind of what happens next question in just a moment. Frank, just want to come to you on what did happen. Could you just talk us through the nature of the attack, what you make of the combination of the missiles and the drones, how Israel and indeed the Allies responded in a kind of technical way to shoot down so many, 300 plus, from the skies? Sure.
Well, Israel had a massive advantage here that it knew it was coming. The US had already signaled this as from Wednesday night. It had probably intercepted communications using its powerful signals intelligence network. The attack came in two phases. 170 drones were launched. Now, they're quite slow. They take several hours to reach Israel across the 1,500 kilometers of distance between Iran and Israel. But Iran also launched ballistic missiles, some of which, at least one of which, was intercepted outside the Earth's atmosphere. How were they intercepted? Well, there are a number of different ways. You mentioned Israel's Iron Dome there, which is its air defense system that has been shooting down a lot of rockets fired from Gaza, for example, by Hamas. But it's also got other methods, things called Arrow and the David slingshot, and it's got Patriot. But it was helped massively by the United States and to a lesser extent by the UK and Jordan. Jordan said that it intercepted a number of flying objects that entered its territory, i.e. Iranian missiles and drones. The RAF, the Britain's Royal Air Force, which was already operating along the borders of Syria and Iraq under something called Operation Shader, to counter any kind of advance or resurgence of so-called Islamic State, of ISIS. They also shot down a number of drones, so they would have gone quite a circuitous route. And the US Navy, which has got some very powerful warships in the region, in the Red Sea, they shot down some, and some of their jets took off. And also Israeli Air Force fighters took off from an air base in the south of Israel in the Negev to shoot them down. So it was a coordinated thing. Highly expensive, by the way. One estimate I've seen saying that this has cost Israel up to $1 billion. But Israel right now is patting itself on the back saying, we defeated this, we knocked out 99%. Make no mistake, Iran has got a massive arsenal of missiles, of ballistic missiles. It's got a whole lot more where these came from.
Okay. Jeremy, where do we go from here then? We have international meetings, we've got the War Cabinet in Israel itself, G7 convening. What does happen next?
Well, interesting that when Joe Biden talked about convening the G7, so they're all going to be in front of their computer screens, he talked about for a diplomatic response. That's clearly what he wants. But Israel's war cabinet has many times in the last 6 months defied the will of Joe Biden. Will they regard this issue as one in which they are able to do that? Or will they feel that because of all the enormous amounts of help that they actually got last night, that actually they owe their allies one and they need to pull in their spikes in terms of confronting them and going. I did notice very early on that right-wing voices in Israel and those similar voices sustain the government in terms of votes in the parliament there were calling for a response, saying this is a tough neighborhood. Not responding would be weak. If Israel's weak, it will be seen as vulnerable and will be attacked again. So that's the debate that they will be having there in Israel. Do what the Americans and the Brits and others want, or push back harder.
Jeremy, thank you very much for that. International editor Jeremy Bowen and our security correspondent Frank Gardner, thank you as well.